Hello and welcome to Untold Facts. My name is Arit Okpo. Intersectionality. It's such a commonly used word, but what does it mean? And more specifically, what does it mean to the everyday LGBT person? In today's episode, we'll explore the different ways that intersectionality happens and the ways that people are affected by it, as well as the things that they need to be aware of. In 2018, there were over 200 reported hate crimes against LGBT people in Nigeria. Now, these were crimes carried out by fellow citizens, individuals who felt empowered to carry out acts of hate against another human being simply because of their sexuality.
They came down from the bus with guns and they had their uniform. So they asked me to bring out my ID card, which I did. And one of them said I was looking like a lady in my ID card.
I didn't remember to be scared. I just pictured the end. I tried to imagine how this tragedy was already going to play out.
So the boy was trying to escape, but it was too late. They dragged him back, they started beating him, everything. At the end of the day, I don't know where they take him to.
Now, there's certain fundamental rights that every Nigerian citizen is entitled to. The right to privacy, the right to life, the right to freedom of association and assembly. Actually, hold that. Because LGBT people in Nigeria have that last right, the right of freedom to assembly and association, severely limited.
Is there ways in which we use legal structures and violence and oppression to determine someone's ability to live fully?
I think this is why we're here, to increase people's knowledge of their rights.
So I'm very happy to know that the statistics, the data is showing that perceptions are changing, that people are becoming more aware of the real life implications of these laws. Because I think when people don't understand that these laws affect people on a day-to-day basis, then they're less likely to care. So I'm really happy.
Change is coming. It's slow. It's taking a while, but it will surely come.
None of us is free until all of us are free. This is how we can have a more inclusive and a more diverse society. My name is Arit Okpo. Thank you for watching. Joining me for what is going to be an awesome conversation is Buky Williams. And Buky is the Executive Director of Education as a Vaccine. And you work with young people to advance their right to health and their protection from all forms of violence. It's so good to have you here, and you're doing such amazing work.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's good. Now, I think we should start by defining intersectionality, because I think many people think it's this really big abstract concept. So what does intersectionality mean? I
mean, lately I would just say that, everybody uses the word intersectionality. It was even recently in a document that someone sent to me about the SDGs, and they just were throwing it around. And you're like, that doesn't mean what you think it means, really. Because when people define intersectionality, they stop at identity. Right? They just stop at, okay, so I am a black person, or I am African, or I am a woman, I'm a gay person. But really what is important about it is remembering that it also has to do with identity and power.
Interesting.
Right?
Yes.
So it has to do with, so what is your status in society and what's your relationship to power?
I see.
And so it looks at the different ways you as a person and the different identities that you have, how they overlap and how they create, different relationships and different shifts in power, which can lead to either, more power, or it can lead to oppression, or can lead to discrimination, because the woman who created it, Professor Crenshaw, she really, she's a lawyer.
Yes.
So she was going beyond looking at critical race theory or looking at black feminist theory to say, really, for example, the case I think that she used in the article that launched this entire term was really the issue of discrimination in the United States. So women who had been employed, I think by Ford, or it was like a car company, had gone to court because they were being paid lower wages.
Yes.
And they just looked at, and they had gone before the court saying, like, not only were they getting lower wages because they were black, but also because they were women.
Yes. Yes.
Right? But unfortunately, the court did not want to open, as they say, Pandora's box by looking at both identities. So they only wanted to look at one. Because you're black, you're being discriminated against, and so that's why you're getting paid lower. But the truth is, not only were they getting paid lower because they were black, they were getting paid lower because they were black women.
Yes, because they were getting paid even less
than black women.
Yes, they were paid less than black men and less than white women. Very true.
Right?
Very true.
So that's really what it was. I think it was more of like a aha moment, right? Of saying that in various things in which you see oppression, is that it's never just about, you know, one thing.
Yes.
You know, yes, we are all women, but that depends. You know, you can be a woman who's also disabled. And so what's your relationship to power?
This is true.
In society. Or a woman who's lesbian or who's bisexual, what's your relationship to power? What happens when you live in a country that criminalizes you?
This is true.
That shifts completely the dynamic and how you move through the world and how your bodies are treated in society. And I think so the reason why a lot of people want to use that word and sometimes misuse it is because it does explain so much of how our existence is lived. It's almost like it gives a legal term and a phrase to our lived realities. It explains it, right? That this is who we are, and often because of this, we're maybe not allowed into spaces, or we're not allowed to talk, or we don't have access to privileges, or we don't have access to support and to status that we deserve in society.
This is really, you know, when you break it down like that, then it becomes very clear immediately how these intersections are constantly happening in our everyday life.
Yes.
So if we're going to talk then about LGBT people, what are some of the intersections that might be happening that they might not realize or they might not be aware of? What are some of the, you know, different intersections that could possibly be at play in an LGBT person's existence?
Yeah, I think especially for those of us who work in, you can say, movement building, or those of us who work around changing laws and policies, or work to improve access to services, that's when it becomes like it opens your eyes a lot more to the situations, because you look at it, and so you can look at a man in Nigeria, and if you ever have to, as a gay man, have to go access health services, right? You just want to go to a doctor.
Yes.
And you want to maybe even just get a checkup. Let's not even talk about like maybe you were going there for a reason. You just want to get a checkup, right? And the doctor asks you, so have you had sexual intercourse in the past 6 months? You know? Just asking general questions, you know, just to do a general checkup. And then proceeds to ask you, who's your partner? How do you have that conversation?
Yes.
In Nigeria, especially after the same-sex marriage.
Exactly. Prohibition
Act has been passed, where your very existence
is
to
a crime.
people is considered illegal, or is criminalized. You know, what does that mean?
Yes.
Because so not only are you a man, even though you have status in our context, in which, you know, we live in patriarchy,
True.
and men hold power in our society, but by then saying that you sleep with men, all of a sudden shifts the conversation and changes your status.
Exactly.
Immediately.
Exactly.
Right? So you're living on that. Now, let's add to that. So you are a man who's gay and who might have a disability, right? So you might, you know, be deaf, or you might be blind, and you can understand then how much more as well, because in our society we avoid conversations around disability, right?
Yes.
A lot of it is either like it would not be my portion, in
things like
whatever
that.
God's name that you call upon, or that, you know, in spite of these things, you know, you might not get an education because if you don't have a family who believes that even in spite of whatever disability you have, you should have access to education or things like that. That completely changes everything. And then you can then throw in poverty as well, because we know about 70% of our population lives on less than $2 a day. So you add in the issue of poverty. So all of these, all of this shape.
They continue to.
Exactly, they continue to shape who we are. So it's not that as conservative people who think like, oh, it just means now there's going to be a new hierarchy of if you are gay, black, blind, deaf, that means you're now at the top of the hierarchy, you're the biggest victim. You know, it's not Oppression Olympics.
It's not.
It really just says that let's look at all of how these identities shape how somebody gets to experience life.
On a day-to-day,
practical basis. Because our life is shaped by the societies we live in, by the laws, the norms that might not be written down on paper, but the norms that exist in those society, and even in our interpersonal relationship. But it goes beyond that, because it goes beyond just your identity. It goes beyond how much power you have access to, or how much power those around you, including the states, have to shape you. You know,
because that makes me actually think about privilege, and how then somebody with more access to power might be blind or uncaring, because let's use the word blind or unaware, because this is not my experience. So I'm a gay man who is fortunate to have a doctor that I can, talk to, and I can be clear about, my orientation and the specific needs of that. So therefore, there is no situation where this is a problem. Let's explore that relationship between intersectionality and privilege. How does privilege affect that? Yeah,
I think for those who hold power, intersectionality is a way for you to examine your privilege, which nobody likes doing. We never think that in any situation we have privilege, right?
This is true.
We never. And even within, I think, this is from even just studying movement building and looking at the LGBT movement, right? It was a big deal when talking about the fact that those who were black or of color, or even from the so-called third world, within the LGBT movement, are not being treated equally as white.
As white gay men,
or white LGBT persons.
White LGBT people,
right? The invisibility of the difference in the struggles, right? Just wanting to, the word just conflated, just say it's all equal. We're all, facing
the same
systemic discrimination in the same ways. No, we don't. Right? So it's even up to us who are even within that movement, who are all fighting the power, to say in what ways do we hold power within this movement that we're building? And in what way are we making sure that we're not living those who matter, behind? And let's even leave gay men for a minute. Let's even talk about women, right? Especially in Nigeria. Let's talk about conversations of when we're talking about feminism in Nigeria, or we're talking about gender equality in Nigeria.
Where it's like,
exactly. And we do not see the issues of lesbian women as relevant.
As valid,
we see it as a distraction, You see it as saying that, you know what, we already are working in a very sensitive context, gay women.
Let's keep that aside.
Just wait
your turn.
I've
actually heard someone say that.
Just wait your turn.
Yes.
It's been said, right? And I think it's a conversation we've been having within the so-called women's movement in Nigeria is, how do we make sure that we do not ignore the needs and the priorities of women who are queer or who are bisexual or who are gay, right? Because often they're invisible in Nigeria. When we talk about homosexuality, it's very much looking at gay men. And then lesbianism is seen as something that happened in high school. Like a lot of people who went to boarding schools, like their stories, like a girlfriend in secondary school. Now you're married with kids, so you don't have that, so you cannot be queer or you cannot be gay.
And then it now becomes something that you no longer need to engage with or think about.
Exactly. So for women who are not gay or who are not queer, you own a lot of privilege in being able to focus on certain things, right? In not thinking that the issues of your sisters are your issues as well. You're very much able to just say, let's just address violence against women like me, against young women. But in what ways do gay women face violence in Nigeria? And are we willing to have that conversation? There is a privilege that we sit in, that I sit in which I would never experience that form of violence. So therefore, I do not think about it. But it's a privilege, eh?
It is a privilege. You're saying this, and I'm making so many mental connections in my head, because these conversations have come up in different ways over the last few months, over the past couple of years, where it has seemed like women's rights activists have said, or gender equality activists have said, yes, you're right, you know, let's agitate for this and this and this. And then when it comes to LGBT, lesbian women or LBT women, then it's a conversation about, no, we all know that this is what the law says. So let's put that aside, and then when we fought for these rights. Well, you're right, you can't pause one. There's systemic oppression and systemic violence being carried out across all spheres.
Right, including just the violence of disappearing people's experiences.
Yes.
You know, the thing about working in a field in which you're trying to change laws or you're pushing for a better, just and equitable society is that often you get to bring your full self.
Yes.
Right?
This is
to
true.
that work. You get to bring who you are.
Yes.
The personal is political. You know what I mean? That's it. You're fighting from, you know, the different factors, from the individual to the household to the community, and then to, like, you know, the state. So you're bringing all of those factors into this fight to change these things, because you believe that there's an interconnection between them, and if you change policies, it makes a difference at the household level, right? In public and private spaces. If you shift the kind of conversations we're having at the household level and the individual level, it has an impact on what the state gets to decide in your name.
And then you're in spaces where you have to
leave the individual behind. You literally leave who you are. You do not bring your full self to these spaces, because your full self is criminalized. Your full self is not loved, is not welcome, is not treated with compassion.
Yes.
You know, I always joke that my activism is at the intersection of love and anger.
That is a very good way to think about it.
You know, definitely stolen from Audre Lorde and from a lot of women who came before me. But really, it is at the intersection of love and anger that I can bring love to my work, because I am loving myself, I'm loving my community. That means I'm loving whoever brings themselves into those spaces, even if I might not like them.
Yes.
And, you know, and that I am angry about the injustices that exist in society. And so I do not get to determine what that injustice just is. I do not get to tell a woman who's gay that her injustice does not matter because religion and cultural beliefs say it does not matter.
This is so true.
Right?
This is so true.
And what intersectionality helps me do is to say that actually it does matter, and I can show you, you know, systemically how it does matter.
Yes.
Right? Because no matter what your beliefs are, that's not what is important. What is important is there ways in which we use legal structures and violence and oppression to determine someone's ability to live fully.
Yes. You know, you're putting this so clearly. Because one person's oppression does not stop while everything else is happening. No. It's not like we put a pause on violence against lesbian women or their inability to access healthcare or these various things while we deal with all these. These things are all happening, you know, at the same time. Yes.
Simultaneously.
You know, and you're saying this, and I'm thinking, for instance, about a gay person who, for instance, is Christian. And so you have your church circle that is anti-homosexuality. Then you have your LGBT friends who are anti-Christian. You know? And you're in this place where you have to put off a part of yourself to go into that circle. Then you come out and you put that on and take off another part. You know? There are real life implications, practical implications.
Massive. So, for example, at Education as Vaccine, we run an SMS platform. We used to have a hotline. But, long story. But we run an SMS platform, and we get messages about sexuality. And so if you get a SMS from a young person who tells you they're gay and doesn't know what to do, you are heartbroken, you are sad, because you realize, like, this is the safest space. They have to say that. You can imagine what it took for that person to come out to themselves.
Yes.
And to then be able to be like, I need to ask somebody, what do I do next?
Yes. Exactly.
And how do I have this conversation? So that's a thing, because this young person, so you can imagine that, you know, looking at adolescent development, it's like it's this huge change in your life, yeah?
You know.
Your body's changing, you're going through all of this emotions, there's hormones running through your veins, you're liking people for the first time, and you realize that you like somebody of the same sex.
And then there's no one to call.
You know, and when people are around you, be like, it's a demon possession. We don't see those kind of things. Our parents who can't even fathom that. And so you think that, where does this person go to be safe?
Yes.
Right? And who do they get to talk to? Who gets to walk them through this thing of saying, you know, what you're feeling is normal. Right? You don't have to act on it immediately. But like, you are normal. Like, this is who you are.
Yes.
And who you are is normal. It is fine. And you will be okay. And we can never openly get to say that to a lot of young people. You know, we never get to validate who they are and get to say that you're real. I see you fully in all your beauty and existence and all of who you are. We see you, and it's fine. You know,
I'm thinking about this, and it's very heartbreaking again when you put it in this real life practical context, and it stops being an academic conversation. How do you think activists can be more practically intersectional? I was at an event recently, and there was a representative from an organization for disabled LGBT people. And she was talking a little bit about her experiences, and then I realized there's an entire spectrum of LGBT interactions and activities and spaces that disabled LGBT people have no access to.
At all.
You know? Or people who don't have the same economic privileges cannot be in certain spaces, or don't have the same protection from oppression that somebody with a little bit more money might have. So how can activists and advocates be more practically intersectional in how we think about movement building for LGBT people?
That's actually an amazing question. I think really it does take a lot of us. One, I always say this, do the reading. You've got to read on these things. Like, you really do have to take the time out. I know we're busy, and I know we're constantly doing this work, but you have to read. You have to know, what does intersectionality mean? You know, what are we talking about? What does movement building look like? What does solidarity look like? What does passing the mic look like? You don't always have to be the person to talk. You don't have to always be the representative of LGBT people. Like, let that diversity shine through. Move. Like, you get tired.
Put it in one word.
Like, move. You know, move. You know, pass the mic. You know, there's always that, like, oh, I'm the voice of the voiceless. You're not the voice of the voiceless. You know, there's nobody who's voiceless. You know, there are just voices that are not heard. It takes you actually listening when you're in a space.
Sorry, I just want to say that thing again. There are no voiceless people. There are people whose voices are not heard.
Yes, and it's not from me. I'm pretty smart, but you know,
from
the reading. You know? Yes, because for me, I used to say that all the time, and I realized that's part of growth. Is that you realize that your voice is not always the one that needs to be heard. Sometimes you just really need to shut up and listen and hear what is being said. So if a person who's LGBT calls you out, stop and listen. Do you know what I mean? Don't just get defensive, because I know we can try and get defensive. I get defensive, like, you know, we can't think of everybody. We couldn't invite all the people to the meeting. They don't know, said we could only have 20 people. And when I was asking, nobody said anything. Just own it. Like, I'm sorry that we did not think to invite you. What can we do next time to make sure that you're in the room? What can we do next time to make sure that your issues are included in the communique? What can we do next time to better guarantee your safety? You know? What can we do better next time to guarantee your safety? How do we do this in a way that does not further reveal your trauma or further re-traumatizes you in the need to tell stories?
Yes.
You know, those kind of things. It really just is about like asking the right questions and making space and being willing to listen and learn and know what it really means to be an ally, right? That an ally does not mean that you get a pat on the back for being like gay friends. You know, I understand, fierce, all of that stuff, you know, Pride Month.
So
like
there's a lot more
there's a lot more to it than that, you know what I mean? Because for me, like, yes, you can be an ally, but like you don't often put your body in danger. Your very existence is not
something that is constantly being threatened.
Exactly, or considered not welcome, you know, or your relationship being compared to pedophilia, bestiality, you know, like just very really ridiculous things that we do here in Nigeria. And I'm just saying, if you want to say that you want to understand intersectionality better in your work and you want to do better in your work, it's really about listening to those who are telling you that you're not inclusive and changing that and doing better. It's about understanding the importance of power. And that power is not just about the power the state has over you, but it is the power that you share among society, among individuals. The truth is we all hold power in different spaces, right? Those power shifts. And
it's dynamic.
Exactly. And you just really have to understand, in what ways am I holding power? In what ways am I sharing power? In what ways am I being subversive, right? In you know, using power for the benefit of those of everybody, of all of us, right? Of really creating a more equitable and just society.
And this is a good point to ask you, what does a more equitable society look like to Buky? Where we're now thinking about LGBT people, what are some things that would say, okay, yes, we're achieving some sort of balance?
I think for me, a more equitable and just society, especially for like people who are LGBT, is when they can love the way they want to love. Like that for me, that's equity. But we can celebrate their love in a way that is so respectful to who they are and to their communities. Because I think that's the very essence of it, right? That's the very basic thing that we take away from people, is we deprive them of their ability to love fully and not to love in ways that are very harmful, that are very just not respectful, right? You just kind of like don't respect who they are. You don't respect their relationship. You don't respect their voices. You don't respect their you know, you don't see them. They're invisible, right? Exactly. And their needs are invisible. I think a more equitable and just society is where people can love, can be visible, can be seen, that we don't get to celebrate the crumbs, right?
True.
That we move from tolerance to acceptance. In very real ways, in legal ways, in interpersonal ways, in really, in Ubuntu, we are because, you know, I am because we are. You know, that for me, that's a more, sounds very, you know, kumbaya-ish, but not for me, that's a more equitable and just world. A more equitable and just world is not that your very existence by being a woman doesn't mean that, you know, you get raided, you know, by the police, like it's happening in Abuja, you know, in 2019.
In 2019.
It makes no sense, or that, you know, but I think I also just want to remind people is that, look, for people who are working in women's rights, for those who are working in sexual and reproductive health and rights, for those who are working in access to justice, we have common, let's say, principalities and powers that are trying to take away our work. And so if we do not come together and be more united and really understand in what ways our works intersect, they have done a good job of coming together and getting money and getting support and trying to overturn the gains that we have made. I don't know why we're debating rights in 2019. I don't know why a woman's uterus is still anybody's business in 2019. Right? I don't know why people choosing who they want to love because of who they are is still up for debate, or cause like everybody, like, you know, like all of these things, like for me it's like we have common people who want to push that back, who want to shift all of these gains that we've made. This real hard work.
And we must provide a unified and you're making me think, just you know, as we're rounding up now, about as we're getting increasing trans visibility in Nigeria, where we're now also seeing, so women's rights is here and LGBT rights is here. But then within LGBT rights, there's, you know, trans people are, and it's very interesting to me how we must consciously and intentionally stay aware of how in our own fight against oppression, we do not begin to oppress others.
That's the privilege,
you know,
right?
Exactly, where we're not acknowledging that we have blind spots. Because we are beginning to see increased violence against trans people.
Of course.
You know, and there's so many aspects, you know, and I like, at the end of it, what you are saying is, you know, it's just, when you said be aware, check your privilege.
Yeah.
Be quiet for a minute, move.
Yeah.
You know? It's really what seems like little things, but when you're facing systems of oppression, sometimes that's the biggest thing you can do.
It is, because I think one thing people forget, like I remember when I just started learning about advocacy, and one of the things I've always remembered is we all have frames through which we see the world.
Yes.
And every information that you get is processed through that frame.
Yes.
So no matter if you're growing, if you're learning, that frame doesn't really completely change. It just shifts,
yes,
you know, based on what you're learning and your willingness to change and understand it. So that then you're able to, you know, be able to listen, and then you're able to learn and you're able to move and shift. And so for us, it's really important, especially when you bring up the trans issue, you know, it really does take you really listening,
yes,
and really learning, right? Because that's what helps to shift your frame.
Yes.
Because if somebody is not real to you,
right,
then you're able to be fine with violence being brought upon them because they're not real. So you can look at trans women and be like,
it doesn't matter what's happening with
exactly,
them.
or trans men and be like, what is this about?
Yes.
And your frame is not going to shift, right? Or look at what's happening to Casta Semaya, you know, and your frame is not going to shift, and we're going to just pit each other against it. And then some people saying they're feminists, but like they don't believe in trans rights and things like that. And I just think that's for us the conversation that needs to be had, and a lot of learning and unlearning
needs to be happening.
Exactly, continually. And that's what happens because you don't understand that these different identities and their relationship to power means things change, and then sometimes you get more power.
And sometimes you give a little up, and that's okay.
But that's the truth is, if we're going to, because that's the thing about intersectionality that I love, you know. Professor Crenshaw was like, she came up with it because this is about dismantling. It's about, exactly, it's about dismantling systemic oppression. You know, it's about dismantling all of the structures that exist to oppress people. And, you know, I have a sticker on the back of my computer that talks about dismantling patriarchy. Right? And, you know, some guy was like, but why can't we just understand it better? And then I was like, bros.
Exactly, exactly.
Let's destroy the thing.
Destroy it, finish it.
Finish it. So that we all can, like, at least, you know, come on equal terms and have a conversation about how do we share power.
Thank you so much, Buky.
Thank you for having me.
See the intersections of love and anger in how you're communicating. And I know that you have said many things have impressed on me personally. And I hope that it does the same for you, because at its core, intersectionality is understanding that people experience the world in a different way from you, and that you owe it to yourself. It's not their job to come and say, help me. It's your job to say, in what ways can I understand how you are existing, and then how can I play a part in making life easier for you? How can I play a part in making sure that the systems of oppression are mitigated for you? How can I be aware of your needs so that we can have a more equitable way of life? And even as individuals, whether LGBT or not, you have to be aware of the fact that people don't have the same access that you do, that people don't engage in the world as freely as you do. And like Buky said, it's not oppression Olympics. We're not going to sit down here and say my own is better or worse than yours. We're understanding that the people that are dealing with things that we're not dealing with. So we look at our privilege and we see how we can help and make a difference. This is how we can have a more inclusive and a more diverse society where we all make space, where we all pause, where we stop speaking for others and allow them speak and take what they have said and accept the validity of it without trying to make it fit into our own frame. My name is Arit Okpo. Thank you for watching. In 2018, there were over 200 reported hate crimes against LGBT people in Nigeria. Now, these were crimes carried out by fellow citizens, individuals who felt empowered to carry out acts of hate against another human being simply because of their sexuality.
They came down from the bus with guns and they had their uniform. So they asked me to bring out my ID card, which I did. And one of them said I was looking like a lady in my ID card.
I didn't remember to be scared. I just pictured the end. I tried to imagine how this tragedy was already going to play out.
So the boy was trying to escape, but it was too late. They dragged him back, they started beating him, everything. At the end of the day, I don't know where they take him to.
Now, there's certain fundamental rights that every Nigerian citizen is entitled to. The right to privacy, the right to life, the right to freedom of association and assembly. Actually, hold that. Because LGBT people in Nigeria have that last right, the right of freedom to assembly and association, severely limited.
Is there ways in which we use legal structures and violence and oppression to determine someone's ability to live fully?
I think this is why we're here, to increase people's knowledge of their rights.
So I'm very happy to know that the statistics, the data is showing that perceptions are changing, that people are becoming more aware of the real life implications of these laws. Because I think when people don't understand that these laws affect people on a day-to-day basis, then they're less likely to care. So I'm really happy.
Change is coming. It's slow. It's taking a while, but it will surely come.
None of us is free until all of us are free. This is how we can have a more inclusive and a more diverse society. My name is Arit Okpo. Thank you for watching.